We're joined today by Jane Viljoen, corporate psychologist and founder of Best Hopes Consulting and Coaching, member of the IMA, and a wonderful person to talk to you at conferences and online. Jane, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Henry.
It's a great pleasure. Jane, please tell us a bit about your practice. I think you're a bit unusual as a member of the IMA in focusing on corporate psychology.
Yes, absolutely. So the services that we provide are very much intertwined with the businesses that are in the IMA, but of course, we're coming at it from a bit of a different direction. So I lead a team of experienced and dynamic coaches and occupational psychologists who offer career development, leadership, team and organisational development. And our unique approach combines the principles from positive psychology, neuroscience, all of the psychology of business, and we enable businesses and organisations to really tap into and realise the potential that they have within themselves by helping their people to be everything they can be. My work specifically focuses on working with senior and emerging leaders and teams as well, by way of one-to-one leadership and executive coaching and training sessions. We offer workshops, psychometric assessment and feedback, just amongst a few services.
Jane, I don't know if you'd agree, but in the past, corporate psychologists had a bit of a reputation of being used to manage out slightly troublemaking members of staff or people who've gone off sick with stress. I'm sure that's not what you do today.
Not at all. We really are in the business of helping people to thrive and reach their potential. And that's why we focus on the positive psychology and neuroscience side of that industry. Because when organisations are really great at having strong leadership, strong values and culture, people want to stay longer, they work harder, they're more productive, and they're not off sick because they're really engaged in the work that they do. So we partner with organisations ideally early on from their inception to help create these cultures where founders and leaders can really help people understand their strategy and their vision of where the business is going, so that everybody's aligned right from the beginning. So it is very different from those old attitudes, I guess. Yeah.
And what specific problems do you solve? For instance, if a company has a very creative member of staff who is a bit disruptive, just to throw one out there, how would you deal with those interpersonal skills?
Well, it's a good question. So we would always start with working with a team as individuals and finding out what their strengths and development areas are. So if it was clear that somebody had a strength and it wasn't being utilised, we would work with the team to really reassign team roles. We would make sure that everybody was able to reach their potential if it's appropriate. Because, if somebody's an artist, but they're working in an IT environment, it might not be appropriate that they want to draw all the time. So it's about making sure everybody is aligned in what their remit is, what's expected of them, but allowing them to thrive and reach their potential in that role. If an organisation or a business was to ask me to come in because there's some disruption in a team, I would always identify what the problems are, what's contributing to the problem. Usually, in my experience, it's to do with communication and leadership. So once we're able to sort out where are the challenges to communication, because of course, every human being sees things through a different lens. We all communicate in a different way. And when you've got a team of people who are almost speaking a different language, and I don't mean a language of a country, but having a different set of values, beliefs, strategy around where the work's going. When you've got all of that in the mix, it's really helpful to unpick it, get everybody together, identify what the shared visions are, and help people to upskill in their communication techniques, in the way that they approach others, understanding the lens through which their colleagues also see them. And it's all of that professional development that makes all of the difference.
Isn't that right? I mean, sometimes if someone's in the wrong job, surely they should be told, look, it's not personal and we're not going to punish you and kick you out. You've got 6 months, but find something else you can do to help us, or we're going to give you the salary because we don't need a lot of hassle. And however much we'd retrained you, you're just in the wrong job, but it's not your fault. I mean, what is the situation with that? Because sometimes people they're just in the wrong job. They're too creative or too disruptive, or they're not creative enough, but they always get punished, and it causes so many problems for the company that the bosses are scared to let them go because of the psychological damage they're going to get from the company not being generous enough.
Well, you highlighted a really complex issue there, because it shouldn't get to the point where somebody has got so far down the track that they're in the wrong job and it hasn't been addressed early on. And if you've got strong leadership, and business owners and managers and leaders are having courageous and truthful conversations early on with their people, it shouldn't get to the point where somebody's a year in, 2 years in, and they're in the wrong job. So again, it's going back to this issue around communication and bravery. We need leaders to be able to have truthful conversations with people, but in a non-confrontational way. So they have to leave their own hang-ups and ego at the door to facilitate really healthy, productive conversations. And yes, sometimes those conversations can be, do you think you'd be better off somewhere else? How can we support you to move on? And that's totally appropriate in lots of scenarios. But yeah, I think it's about getting in early enough to not let that become an issue in the first place. Of course, large, especially public sector organisations have a huge challenge around that, because they don't have strong leaders who are willing to challenge and who are willing to have those conversations early on. So somebody could have been in a job for 10, 15 years and underperforming, or they're not enjoying it. And then, of course, this term we hear a lot of, this quietly quitting or quiet quitting, it's been around for a long time. It's always been there, but we're hearing more and more about that right now. But people do that, they disengage. Why would you go the extra mile when you're not appreciated, or you're not in sync with the values that surround you? So yeah, it's definitely a challenge that needs addressing early on.
In terms of addressing the challenges of creating healthy teams, what sort of support do you need from your clients to be successful?
Great question. So an organisation or a business really needs to be open to recognising that they might not yet have it all exactly as it should be. And that's really tough, because when you've had somebody passionately founding a business and it's their idea and it's their concept, to have somebody else then come in and say that's not quite working can be personal, it can feel personal. So where myself and my team are really skilled is partnering with organisations, with leaders, with business owners, to get alongside them, not as a critical, telling them off what's going wrong, but as a critical friend coming in, looking at what's working, looking at where the improvements and advantages are in tweaking things so that they just feel better for everyone. And of course, usually if they're asking us to come in the first place, those are the businesses that are open to having that feedback, that truthful feedback, and acting upon it. So they support us by being open, but we support them by giving them all the tools they need, not just to implement changes, but the techniques and strategies they need to make sure those changes are long lasting, that everybody's engaged, the communication's right, and that everybody is involved as a team, moving things forward, rather than it used to be done like that, or we have never done it like this. Working with teams, getting the support of the managers and leaders, we support them as well in that process. So we very much partner with organisations.
Right. And how can organisations learn from your previous experience? Is it possible to speak to previous clients to find out what their journey was like?
Yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes when if I bring on one-to-one clients for executive coaching, depending on the industry they're in, because there is a little bit of a misunderstanding that an executive coach must have knowledge in your specific industry, but that's not the case, because coaching is about being an expert in asking really great questions and helping people to strategize. It's not necessarily about the industry they're in, it's about the person they are and the skills that they have. So, making sure that people feel comfortable working with me or one of the team, we would always put them in touch with previous clients, perhaps who'd had a similar challenge, a similar role, or a similar industry, if the client wanted to. But I do find, Henry, that if I have a half-hour conversation with somebody and they share what they'd like to achieve from a coaching assignment, they rarely need to speak to somebody, because we make an agreement between us about what the objectives will be, how we'll measure it, how we'll know what success will look like, and that's usually enough for people.
What particular challenges are your clients anticipating in today's environment where cost of living is going crazy, people are having to cope with coming out of the COVID work from home space? It's a very, very strange time for business, isn't it?
It's really changing a lot, and it's turbulent times, and there's lots of things ahead that people are worried about staff turnover. Recruitment's a real challenge at the moment, especially in businesses and organizations where customer facing services and having literally people to deliver their service is critical. Recruitment is a big challenge. So organizations need to be attractive to new recruits. They need to have great onboarding systems. They need to be really, really astute in upskilling and making sure people are confident, not just competent, to work in their business. All the issues around disengagement, people being off sick, quiet quitting, the great resignation, all of those things haven't gone away. They are very much part and parcel of the landscape of running a business at the moment. And we definitely help with all of those things, and potentially other things that will come up in the future. What I do know from experience, Henry, is that people are people, and our challenges and problems don't actually change that much. We tend to have the same challenges and the same problems. People want to feel valued. They want to feel engaged in the work they do. They want to feel like they've got good quality of life, work-life balance, and that they're rewarded for the effort they put in. It's not a really difficult formula. It's just that it's quite difficult getting it right for everybody.
And a lot of the time, senior members of staff want the boss to stand down and go and do something else and let them take over.
Well, it depends on the business. It depends on how the business is structured. If I'm working with a large corporate organization with multiple thousands of employees, there's such a hierarchy that people are working in silos, they're working in teams, in divisions, in departments. And so, everybody takes responsibility for their part of that business. Whereas a smaller startup business, where it might have a very flat structure, where there's 30 of you, and you're all doing similar level of role, but you're taking on different responsibilities, people want to be empowered to get on with the job and to feel like people trust them. And trust is one of the biggest things that we help and support businesses to develop and cultivate within their teams, because it's such a deciding factor in whether people enjoy their job and whether they're going to stay with you.
You are multi-award winning, which is fantastic. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Interestingly, some of these awards, as IMA members will appreciate, sometimes a team nominates you, or sometimes you nominate yourselves for a project that you've done. One of the biggest accolades that I'm so proud of is the award that I got from CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development. It's a very prestigious organisation in the HR field. And yes, I won the award for Best HR / L&D consultancy for a program that I deliver called the Aspire program. And that's a career development program that was designed to help increase engagement, reduce staff turnover, and provide robust succession planning for an organisation to help them to fill future roles. In fact, there are profit organisation, which made it even, more exciting because they got part of the award as well. Just really great to be recognised for that work. I also won the Business Culture Award for contribution to organisational and cultural change within an organisation, which is, really what a lot of organisations are struggling to bring about. So being able to be recognised for the work that I and the team had done around instilling culture change, it's really rewarding to get that acknowledgement.
That's interesting. What's the most surprising award you've ever been given?
Well, interestingly, much to my surprise, I was awarded one of the top 100 influencers in leadership in 2020 out of the blue. I was so shocked. An organisation, an HR company based in India, which is a huge emerging market, had been following me on LinkedIn. And yeah, they posted me in this top 100 and I had all these people wanting to interview me. It was awesome. Really nice surprise.
Has that opened up business internationally? Have you followed up in India?
Yeah, definitely. We have a huge amount of postgraduate MBA startups in India who they've been actually to the UK to do their MBA, and they've got a real sense of the nuts and bolts of their business, but they don't yet know how to lead. So it's a huge market for us, and we're really leveraging that and supporting and co-creating a lot of really great leadership development programs in India. In the leadership development program, it's international, it's everywhere, is our Excuses Code program. And I think the website will just pop up there. Excuses is designed for the leaders of tomorrow. So it's emerging leaders and people who are already in a leadership role who want to learn all the techniques and strategies about being a really inspirational leader. I would really encourage people to take a look at that website.
Tell us about your team.
There's 11 of us on the team. We are ranging from executive coaches through to occupational psychologists, and everybody has a specialism on the team. And I'd really encourage anybody who's interested to see who's working at Best Hopes Coaching and Consulting to pop over to our website, which will come up on the screen. Our team is really dynamic. We specialise in a range of things right through from equality, diversity and inclusion, coaching and mentoring expertise, leadership development, psychometrics and recruitment. And depending on what piece of work comes in, I would put together the ideal team to deliver it. The core team are actually on the website, but I have a fantastic network of associates where there's up to 30 of us who deliver larger corporate interventions. So I'm really fortunate just to know some fantastic people in my field, and I'm not scared of bringing the best people forward to do the job.
Do you have a history of generating measurable returns on investment that new clients could actually identify and could model over to their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to measure any intervention that a company's spending money on. So we always measure, we always have pre and post evaluation based on a range of data and metrics. So it might be that we measure things like attitudes towards the company, engagement, whether people are considering leaving in the future. We would measure all of that. But of course, numbers around staff turnover, how many days people are off sick, that kind of thing is also a really great metric. And there's been quite a lot of research done by Harvard Business Review around the ROI of executive coaching. And it's been proven now that for every $1 spent on executive coaching, an organisation can expect 7 times return on their investment in a range of different metrics. And nicely, they did that research for us, but there's a lot of research out there backing that up. So there's a lot of evidence around the ROI of interventions that we offer.
Do some of your clients find it difficult to know how much detail to go into when talking to people about an opportunity, or is that just my problem?
Everybody's different, Henry. This is the thing. It's about understanding where the gaps are in your performance. So for one person, the gap might be about knowing how much detail to go into. For somebody else who's an introvert, might be when to speak in a meeting. For somebody who's an extrovert, might be when to keep quiet in a meeting. Everybody's different. And so working with a psychologist in a business setting, you know, you can go through quite a lot of psychometrics, you can understand your personal style, you can get insight into your blind spots, and you can also get feedback from a range of different sources around what those blind spots are, but to be supported to develop those. And if you've had specific feedback that you go into too much detail, then a great technique would be to stop when you're talking and ask somebody, have you got enough information? Would you like me to share any more? And give them the opportunity to say, no, I've got it, thanks. So there are just techniques. And, you know, I often say to people, this is not rocket science, but it is neuroscience. You have to understand the impact that your communication style and mine and everybody else's, the impact that we have on others and what it's like being on the receiving end of you and me. And if we haven't got the insight into that, we will go on making the same errors of judgment, making the same mistakes and having the same impact. And that's what stifles people's performance and reaching their potential, because they're not aware of their blind spots. Nobody tells them. And that's why working with an executive coach to identify what they are frees people to move beyond those blockages, to just be absolutely everything they can be, and to enjoy what they're doing more because they're not getting those negative vibes back. So everybody's different, but there are techniques that you can learn and other people can learn around, you know, what your personal challenges are.
What tools do you and your coaches use in your work? You've mentioned psychometric testing. Do you use video to bring awareness to people of how they come across? What tools do you use?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it depends on what the challenge is. Often we run workshops where people are working together. Sometimes we film them with their permission, of course, if they're having skills practices, especially if they are training and coaching and mentoring skills or interview techniques, or you know, if they're in a recruitment process, we would video them and give them feedback. So the psychometrics, the term psychometrics really just means measurable, reliable and valid sources of measurement. So rather than just saying, I'm going to ask somebody 10 questions and now I know the answer, these are very well researched questionnaires that have been tested to make sure that they are reliable and that they can be replicated for each person so that we get the same result every time. Now, in that psychometric field, there might be things like testing for levels of emotional intelligence. It could be personality styles. It could be how defensive somebody is, how well they communicate. It could be 360 feedback. So we have a tool that we use where we invite up to 20 colleagues to rate somebody in a range of measures that would tell us, based on our experience of doing this hundreds of times before, what that actually means to the relationships, what it means to that person. And then we would work with that individual to help and support them with the behaviours and the techniques they need to offset how people see them. Because perception is key, Henry. We work with perception every day. And if we know how other people perceive us, we can do something about it. If we don't know, we can't.
Do you think that society needs to somehow re-engineer itself to have more effectively engineers working within organizations that are looking to make significant changes, but do not have the emotional intelligence to bring those about within organizations? Or do you think, is there a loss of talent to organizations because people without emotional intelligence are not managed effectively?
Yeah, definitely. You know, if I work with an IT company or, you know, really very focused on technical expertise, I often find that people just generally are less interpersonal. And it's not that they don't have the capacity to be emotionally intelligent. It's just that they've never learned the behaviours or the techniques, because they've never had the drive to, because they're so task focused and they're very, very good at what they do technically. They don't have that same desire to connect interpersonally. But what that means is organisations need to recognise that, and that's where people like me can come in and make a difference, because we work with teams who are lower on the scale of emotional intelligence, but help them to identify what matters to them. Maybe they don't need to be totally emotionally intelligent. Maybe it works for them, but it's about how do they communicate with other segments of the business? How do they improve those interpersonal relationships? Because ultimately they do have to work with stakeholders, people beyond their own team. So yeah, organisations need to recognise that and to have things put in place to let everybody, regardless of their style, to reach their potential. And when businesses and leaders recognise that, different people have different ways. We are diverse workforces. We don't need to all be the same, but it's about having a common language. And that only comes from building trust and communication. And that's why I go on all the time about trust and communication, because without that, a business will suffer, whether it's corporate communication to thousands of people, or whether it's a team communication to 5 people. If that's not on point and landing in the right way with the right level of emotional intelligence, things go wrong, because then people see through different lenses, people are triggered, people don't feel valued, they then feel stressed, they might go off sick, they might leave, and then businesses are left with filling that spot. Then it can all be remedied by effective communication and upskilling in people's competence. It's actually that straightforward.
How do your services affect recruitment? I mean, that is absolutely crucial, isn't it? You want to recruit the very best people, and people who are in the market who are very good will be leaving because there were trust issues that their previous employer, I would have thought, or maybe they're offered more money, but on the whole, I'd have thought really good people leave because they're not enjoying being somewhere. How can your services help people recruit those kind of people effectively?
There's a big drive on values-based recruitment, really, the last 10 years, a lot more organisations. Of course, technical expertise is important, but shared values tends to be much more of a predictor of whether somebody will enjoy their role and stay with an organisation. And actually monetary reward is important. Of course, people need to be able to pay their bills, they need to be able to live well. But when people look at jobs and look at the things that are underneath the job title, like level of responsibility, work-life balance, the conditions of a role, the money will not always be the thing that people go for. They will go with the package. So organisations do really well to make sure that they're giving people what they expect. Flexi working, perhaps hybrid working, especially if people have been working from home. Some people love it, some people hate it, but there's an element of compromise, I think, that organisations need to make around what are you hoping for? What does a good employer look like to you? And having those open conversations right from the beginning. If people are ridiculous in their demands, of course, they're not going to be hired. But getting those things on the table early on can ensure that really highly skilled, competent people come along for an interview with an organisation, whereas they might miss them otherwise.
People would normally think of your services perhaps as being just appropriate to more senior level people. How are your services appropriate to hiring recent graduates?
It doesn't matter what level somebody's coming into an organisation. If we assist a business with their recruitment strategy, we help them from the beginning identify what they're looking for, what competence looks like, how to measure that competence with a framework, for example. We get involved at every level with recruitment and onboarding. So it's certainly not just for senior people. Career coaching can be fantastic for people at entry level in an organisation to keep them engaged. That part you were asking about around recruitment, what we find is when there is an active career development program within an organisation, that's also a very attractive recruitment offer for young graduates. So if they know that in 5 years they will have been developed and they'll have learned new skills, and that there's a formula to see that through, they're much more likely to come and work for your organisation than starting on a higher salary somewhere else with no obvious pathway to development. So it's every level within an organisation that we can help. It's just that the one-to-one team strategy, especially at that senior level, when we're looking at what does an organisation want itself to be, we tend to start at the top so that we can clarify what that looks like. But we would work with the whole organisation to really help people engage with that and to contribute to it and to co-create new values sets or new culture. We help people co-create that.
How do your services help firms make sales and keep clients?
Well, what we know about how people treat each other within an organisation, what the culture is like internally, is bound to rub off on how customers feel. So if there's a culture of respect and trust, then customers see that, they pick up on that. Authenticity is really, really important. And so, those kind of sales techniques of yesteryear around scarcity and pressure and all of that doesn't really work now in our modern society, where people are striving for authenticity and they're striving for people to be truthful with them and respect them. So where sales teams have been trained in those old-fashioned techniques that people are just turned off to, we'd heavily get involved to help them to understand how they can increase their conversational intelligence. We've talked about emotional intelligence, but sales teams really benefit from understanding the neuroscience of trust and how to ask specific types of questions that elicit trust and authenticity, because that's what consumers are really looking for at a subconscious and conscious level.
That's really interesting, especially from a commercial point of view, because if your services can help companies win more business, more profitable business, then of course that's a very measurable return on investment.
Absolutely.